Good morning, everyone. My name is Dragoș Ciobanu. I am a lecturer in Applied Translation Studies, and I also run the MA program in Applied Translation Studies at the University of Leeds. I have a background in languages and also in translation studies, and I have also spent time in the industry as an instructional designer, and I have been building interactive e-learning resources for a variety of projects and organizations. So this is how I am associated with the ORCIT project. I'm really sorry I'm not there with you enjoying the conference atmosphere and making new friends. And I genuinely appreciate the invitation and the chance to try and give you a little bit of an insight into how we tried to build effective online resources. How effective they are, it's totally up to you to decide as users. But I just wanted to share a few ideas about what it's like to work in this area now, especially now that the conversation about e-learning tends to be focused around the massive online open courses, otherwise known as MOOCs. So, as I was saying, my background is in languages. I studied English and French back in Romania. And then I went and worked as a technical writer and translator for a multilingual, multinational company. And this was very interesting experience for when I came to Leeds and I got involved with translation technology, with e-learning, and especially I started working closely with professional interpreters in the ORCIT project. And the more I was working with interpreters, the more I realized something that was actually quite surprising about them and instructional designers, so e-learning specialists. This came as a bit of a surprise. I didn't expect it, but the more we were together, the more it became apparent to me that both interpreters and instruction designers share this trait. They think themselves as being some kind of wizard. They are very proud of their craft, of their skills, and maybe sometimes they would feel that they are misunderstood wizards. But generally, at least for me, I felt this was the atmosphere, and it was a very very interesting one. So, what was it like working in this environment? Well, here we were, a bunch of self-proclaimed wizards. I don't know, think of us as Hermione and Harry Potter's friends, perhaps. And we were trying to do something in an age when anyone pretty much with a webcam or a camera could record themselves giving a lecture and then use one of the many online repositories for open courses. So they could post on Coursera or Udemy or edX and reach millions of users. I chose these three platforms, Coursera, Udemy, and edX, because in 2015, so only last year, they were reported to have over 30 million subscribers. That's a lot of subscribers. So how do we stack up? I mean, after all, if you want another way of thinking about it, 30 million subscribers is actually 50% more of all the students enrolled in tertiary education in the EU. So here we were, a small project, and the obvious question is, what are we doing? How are we going to compete with all these big platforms? And of course, this leads to quite a few questions that tend to keep you up at night. Although these questions don't seem to affect the bear population quite as much. And we kept thinking of things such as future proofing. What can we do in order to make sure that our resources do not become obsolete in a couple of years? What can we do to ensure that the resources reach their target audience? How can we evaluate them better? And also, what can we do in order to ensure that they are not easy to replicate and that we don't end up with 1,000 clones of dubious quality. So I was going to talk very briefly about each of these topics, and I'll start with future-proofing. As you can see, we have templates, but then our partners have been working very hard to actually adapt the scenarios. We are not looking for carbon copies, and instead, every partner has redesigned the scenarios in order to meet the cultural and local expectations and to resonate with the trainee interpreters. Also, it's not just the scenario itself, it's also the medium. Ever since we started ORCIT, we have filmed generally less than 3 minutes per clip. And it was very interesting to, again, read a study from edX, which was focusing on the 10% of their many million users who actually finished an edX course. So I should stress again, 90% of the MOOCs users generally don't finish anything. 10% are the motivated ones. And the 10%, they hardly ever watched more than 4 minutes of video, regardless of how long the video was. So future-proofing in the case of ORCIT is done because our resources were already built with very short videos in mind for mobile capacity and in order to appeal to the younger and perhaps more restless generations. We also, I mentioned mobile, we're also using the latest HTML5 standards so that all our resources are viewable on mobile devices, on tablets, on laptops, and so on. In terms of reach, there used to be the case that if you had a website, that was it. That was amazing. That was everything you needed to do. That is now called outbound marketing, and the situation has changed. Now, the focus is more on writing content that is targeted and appealing to specific audiences, not to the whole wide web. So we have also started doing that, and we have started engaging with the hubs of interpreting trainers as well as interpreting trainees. And as an example, this is the Facebook page of the European Masters in Translation Network. Also, the University of Leeds Center for Translation Studies has quite a few subscribers who are interpreters or trainees. So we are publicizing our resources more through such a targeted medium rather than just writing generally for the web. In addition, Twitter is very much used tool by professional linguists, and we are engaging with the most popular hashtags among interpreters and translators and trainers alike. In terms of evaluation, this is a really tricky question because regardless of what people say, they don't actually know how to evaluate online resources. And that's not great news for the funders or the managers who want figures or some sort of results. If we go back to the MOOCs, let's remember that only 10% of the users of MOOCs actually finish a course. Is that success? What is success? Number of clicks or the time spent on the website? What is it? Within ORCIT, we're actually very keen to hear from the trainers and the trainees. So we, and Svetlana will talk about evaluation a bit later, we have started asking for more meaningful feedback rather than just looking at the stats of clicks and where people come from and how much they spend on the website. The resources are meant to complement training. We want to hear from the people using them. So this is how we chose. We've chosen to evaluate. In terms of replicability, are we still standing out, or are we going to be absorbed in the near future? I personally think ORCIT is one of the very few projects that has a truly multilingual, multicultural dimension. What we do is actually viewed by the e-learning industry as being extremely expensive. Although it is effective, they think it is expensive to have a scenario adapted by different trainers in different languages, delivered in those languages. The e-learning industry and many e-learning and MOOC providers do exactly the same. They tend to just have one script, which is spoken by a presenter, generally in English, and then translated into a wide range of languages and uploaded as subtitles. This is the full extent of the multilingual experience in most of the courses out there. Maybe sometimes you might have a machine voice which reads out the text, but almost nobody, from my knowledge, almost nobody goes to the trouble of doing what our partners have been working so hard on doing, which is actually adapting the ORCIT scenarios and delivering them with the cultural, the local sensitivities in mind. And talking about internationalization and localization, we have started to put together our own internal list of good practices for localization, of how the resources need to be designed, even from a technical point of view, for easy localization later on. And it's still quite amusing to, whenever we interact with other instructional designers who do not have the languages background, the interpretive background, the translation background, there is still a lot of confusion out there, and localization to many people just means translation and subtitling. So our contribution is going to be also through these guidelines and best practices for effective training in multilingual contexts. So this is what I wanted to share with you. And now I'm going to pass over to Tamara, who is going to show you a few examples of when this localization goes wrong and what kinds of best practices we have developed. So thank you very much for your time. And remember, visit orcit.eu. Thank you and goodbye. Bye-bye.